Hi, friends. Logan Clements here with the Better Events Podcast. And this week's episode, I am sharing some of my go-to tips for your next event, run a show. Yes, you're just going to be hearing my voice. This is a solo episode, but consider this kind of a 201 follow-up to one of our original episodes where we did an overview of what a run a show was. Here, I'm going to dive a little bit more into some of the key differences between a run a show and other key event documents, talk about our free downloadable template you guys have been loving, and my top 10 go-to tips for someone who is looking to optimize and improve their event run a show. So stick around.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
All right, friends, settle in. You're just hearing from me this week. We like to drop these solo episodes in every so often during one of our seasons of the podcast. Sometimes it's because we're having a busy event season, and other times because it's just really fun to showcase what Mary and I are passionate about. And so my episode here is all about tips for your next event run of show. And so who is this episode for? It's not just for event producers or show callers. I find that I'm working with other different stakeholders on these event run of shows. So maybe you're an event manager working at an agency, or an event director, or you could even not have event in your title. I find a lot of times when I work on my corporate shows, I'm working with in-house communications teams. So maybe you do more communications or PR, and you're getting asked to write a run a show, and you're looking to just elevate that experience. You could also be someone hosting your own event and you don't have such specialized roles, or you could be a producer or a show caller looking to learn more about some of my pro tips for your event run a show. So we always start broad here on the podcast. What is a run a show? Well, I would broadly say a run a show is just a spreadsheet with minute by minute or even second by second cues of what is happening when on your stage or as a part of your program. And the important part here is it is very much for your production team, your stage managers. If you have any AV or production crew, they like to look off a run a show, and using an Excel document that breaks that down minute by minute, second by second, what's happening with the music, with the mics, with the graphics, with the lights, who's on stage, all of that needs to be captured in one easy to read document. Now, if you want to learn more about the basics of a run a show, go back to episode 5, which I still crack up now that we're at episode 207. So over 200 episodes ago, you can go back and listen to our episode of what is a run of show and how to use it. I will caveat, it's a little bit of a time capsule. You can see how our episode formats have changed since then, but what we said really still rings true. So that link is in the show notes just to the YouTube, but if you search on your favorite podcast platform, you can go back and find it. Another thing I like to mention, we talk about jargon here. So I'm going to call it a run a show. I've been a part of different event teams that like to call it a show flow. There's an actual software called Show Flow without the W. That is a paid software service. I have found most of my run a shows are coming in like an Excel sheet, or I love a Google sheet, anything that's shareable. Another word for run a show might be ROS, just that acronym. We love our acronyms. Or you might hear this as a Q sheet. All of those are synonymous. So no matter what you call it in your industry, I just find like run a show seems to be the most common across all of my different types of events that I do. And then what's the key difference between a run a show and a timeline? So Mary does a lot of like full event planning management. I used to wear that hat a lot, where I would do soup to nuts every part of an event. And as a part of that overall event management, you would create a timeline that has what time can you get into the venue? Okay, what vendor is dropping off when? What needs to be set up by what time? That could be an Excel sheet. It could also be a Word document. And the key difference with a run of show is it might include some of the same information like that, but it is really focused on your programming and is meant to be a working document for your production team. And I have done this. I even made a run a show for myself when I was a team of one for one of my nonprofit clients this spring, where I was helping run all the graphics. And I just needed a one sheeter that helped tell me what was happening exactly when. And it was a lot easier to read than maybe a timeline that has all the different event elements and other vendors that don't really matter to that production team. So timeline might be event specific, but I will say run a show is very much production specific. Another word I've seen come up with some of my clients is like, what's the difference between a run a show and a script? Again, I've had some clients who call their run a show a script, but script in my mind is like a Word document, actual talk track or bullets of what the speakers are going to say. Again, that could have some key timings in it, but we know speaking, it can go really long. And so that document might be like 40 pages. And that's great to have for your speakers, and maybe your key lead person, your producer, your show caller would use that to follow along. But for most of your techs, they want something simple. And so a run a show, that exact event where I made one, I had a script that was 40 pages and I turned it into a run of show that was a page and a half that told me exactly like just the key elements, what happened when, and key times I needed to change things that happened on the screen. And so that's the difference. I would say don't make extra work for yourself if you don't have a production team at all. But if you have anybody, even a single tech doing your show, please make a run of show. I will digress here slightly. I have had some techs, especially in-house techs that work for a company that starts with an E. They have told me that they do shows without a run of show. And that blows my mind and makes me very stressed out, both for them and for the end client, because I don't know how you do an event without one. Even Mary and I had one for like the Better Events conference where we did use a producer behind the scenes, but even the most simple things, we did a run a show for our producer, and then we had our script of like bullets of what we wanted to make sure we didn't forget. And so I can't imagine doing any event without a run of show. So that just makes me really stressed out. And the key reason why is if you don't give that document to your AV staff, you're going to be trusting that they either just know what to do, or you're relying on a person to sit next to them and tell them what to do, which that can work in some scenarios, like if you're really having last minute changes. But just giving them some piece of paper, you're going to set them up for success, because if you forget a cue or forget something has to happen, but it was written down on your run a show, then maybe your AV tech can actually help you out and save your butt on something that you might have forgotten versus just relying what's on your head. So please, 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 this is my begging to all of the event industry, please have a run of show. So hopefully that gives you a better idea of like the difference between a run of show, a timeline, and a script. Now I'm going to pause here real quick and just plug our most popular free resource we offer you listeners is our run a show template. We've talked about it in a couple episodes. I feel like back in the original like first season, I don't remember how often we've mentioned it since, but we consistently every week have like 5 to 10 people reaching out to our email, our inbox to get access to that run a show template. And it is free. So just send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. I have updated it, which I'm excited to say, because I think my last time that Mary and I updated that template might have been 2020. And because it's free, it's just been something, we just haven't had time to update. I have updated it for 2025 with a couple tweaks of how I've been using my run a show template as a show caller, updated some of my cells to make sure it makes sense. It is predominantly geared for an in-person event, but I put some notes in there for if you're trying to do hybrid, which is something I still see a lot of clients doing. I am also going to be offering, and I'm going to put it out there because it's not available yet, but anyone who asks for the free template, we will send you more information once it becomes available, that we are going to offer a paid template. But think about this template like the free one is going to be your basic, great if you don't want to look at a blank page, you need a jumping off point. The paid version is going to have multiple tabs, so multiple templates for different types of events. Because as you know, Mary and I both work a plethora of events, and all of those have very slightly different variations. There's also just different ways to lay out your run a show. And so we want to make that widely available. But as you know, with anything, it takes time to build something like that. And so that is why that will be a paid run a show template that will be available at a later date. Let's say sometime later this summer. But again, if you opt in and ask for the free version to our email, we will then make sure to send you that paid offer just if you're curious and want to learn more. All right, so that's more about the template.
Hey y'all, Sean Walker with Audio Engineers Northwest here for a quick tip this week. The question came in, what is an A1 and what is an A2 and what's the difference. In the context of a corporate event or nonprofit or anything kind of like that, that's not a musical event, not a concert, an A1 is the person mixing the show out front at the mixing console, and an A2 is the person putting lavaliers or handing microphones to the talent on stage, usually behind the scenes, and they make a little A2 world where they've got all the wireless and stuff. That person is also in charge of coordinating the wireless and making sure that there are no dropouts or any problems. They're also usually in charge of whatever comm system you've got on staff if it's a smaller kind of show. As the show grows, then there's additional comms or RF tech, and things just continue from there. If you need more information, you can reach out Sean at audioengineersnw.com or at our website, audioengineersnorthwest.com. Hope you're having a great week, and see you next time.
I feel like I've gotten good context here for you for the run of show. I do want to jump in now to some of my go-to tips. And before I get to number one, I will just caveat, all of these are a little random and they kind of jump around, but they are all actionable that you can take. And if I had a client who even implemented 2 of these tips of the 10, I feel like it would be such a game changer for their event and just help things run a little bit smoother and help there be a little less back and forth when we're trying to figure out the run of show. And my role that I usually do in events, honestly, is I take a client's timeline or sometimes even just bullets of what they want to happen when, and I put it into my run a show template and my formatting. And then from that, I have certain questions or conversations we have to have about key elements that I think some people just forget. So some of my tips are going to address that. But it is something that I really do enjoy doing. And I feel like I can make run a shows in my sleep now. But these are just, again, some tips that are going to help you if you are trying to do it yourself, help you feel a little bit better about your run a show. All right. So my first tip for your run a show is to think about transitions. So this is transitions between speakers, between elements. Let's say a video plays, and then you have, Jane is speaking. Okay, great. Does Jane need to get introduced by the MC after the video, or will Jane come to stage while the video is playing just in the last 20 seconds? I'm a little biased, and I'm going to say I think this is the best analogy ever when it comes to event run shows, but you can tell me if you agree or not. I always say that transitions are like condiments on a sandwich. And because when you don't have condiments on a sandwich, let's say mayonnaise or mustard or whatever condiment you like to put on a sandwich, you're going to have a really dry sandwich and you're going to notice. But when you have mustard or mayonnaise or whatever you like on your sandwich, you're probably not going to notice it because you're going to notice the other parts of the sandwich that are just so delicious and yummy. So transitions are ones that you're not going to notice when they happen correctly, but you will notice if they don't. And something I see a lot of clients will think about is how folks get on stage. They'll talk about, do we want a voice of God introduction or some walk-on music, or, how do we want that to happen? And sometimes they forget the transition after of how does that person then get off the stage? Do they say thank you and goodbye? Do they say thank you, now I'm going to turn it over to next speaker? Here's where having an MC can be really helpful to help make smoother transitions between speakers. But also it's not necessarily required. You don't have to have an MC for your show, but just make sure you think through some of those transitions. I think music is a great friend of yours. If you can make sure that you have music included in your AV scope for them to play music for you, you as the client, or again, where you can engage an event producer like myself, you often need to say exactly what music you want and provide the music file. Sometimes they can do a Spotify playlist, but I like to do the actual MP3 file for people. So think about those transitions, see where you can either make it smoother and tighter, meaning shorter, or where you need to just have that MC or somebody jump in. So that's my first one. Tip number 2, plan on a 2-minute late start. Ooh, this feels a little like a hot take because I feel like we have some listeners who love everything to run on time. And listeners, I feel you. If you are that person, I am you. I like when everything runs on time. And so this pro tip is to help those parts of me that like things to run on time because, spoiler alert, you're almost always going to start your event a few minutes late. I recently got to go to the Beyonce concert, not once, but twice. And even Beyonce makes people wait. Now, she makes people wait. I want to say in LA when I went to the show, it technically started at 7, but we were able to find on the internet that it didn't really start till I think she came out different nights at like 8:15, 8:20. We were the third show. She came out at 8:35, meaning an hour and a half after she said she was going to start. So we are not Beyonce. Most of your events are not going to have the same draw as Beyonce to keep people waiting for an hour and a half. But I would always plan on it either taking people a little bit longer to get into your event or just a little longer to settle down. And so my favorite thing to do is start my event 2 minutes late. And when I say start on the run of show, if the session was supposed to start at 2, I actually have it at 2:02. And that's so we can be quote unquote late, but we're really on time. See, listeners, that part of you likes to be on time. That's the part I'm feeding, because if you plan on being 2 minutes late, then everything's going to run on time when you start 2 minutes late, versus you planning on 2 and all of a sudden now all your times are off because you have to wait 2 to 3 minutes. And adjust that 2 minutes to, if you have like a really big audience, you can make it a little later than that. I also know some clients who are sticklers that like this is a company culture thing that they start on time. If that's you, feel free to, institute it. But I will say I have ones who say that is their thing. And then we get on site and they're like, oh no, we need a few more minutes to get people seated. So my good rule of thumb across all my shows I do, except my sporting events, because those do need to start very specifically at a certain time, but to plan a 2-minute late start. My third tip is to use the speaker timer to manage your time. So the speaker timer, I'll link to my YouTube video that I talk more about it, but it's essentially a shot clock, like a sports analogy. It is a timer that your show caller or production team can control to set for a certain amount of time. It's near usually your downstage monitor. So facing the stage for your speaker only to see, not the audience. And it can count down any amount of time, or it can count up if you'd like. I usually do count down. And this is where you can use the speaker timer to help manage your speaker's time to keep your event running on time. But I say this as a pro tip because often when I get brought in, it's a little too late. So use your speaker timer to manage your speaker's capabilities. So let's say you have a CEO, they always go over the amount of time you give them. So here's what you do. You tell them you have 7 minutes to speak. You set the speaker timer to 7 minutes, but in the run of show, you actually put 10 minutes. Now the rub with this plan is if your CEO wants to see how all the sessions flow together, they will probably catch on that there are 10 minutes of extra padding in their session. So you might need to pad those somewhere else, or again, isn't going to work for everyone. But especially if you have external speakers, people outside your organization, this is something I just highly recommend. Make sure you tell them less time than they have if they are known for going over time. I've had a series of speakers who are really good at landing the plane exactly when we tell them to, and they love the speaker timer to actually show them how much time they have. But more often than not, I see organizers or event teams unsure of how to use the speaker timer. And this is one of my favorite strategies, is use it to end a little early to give yourself some of that padding. So you're starting a little bit later, but then speaker timer to help end a little earlier. My fourth go-to tip for your run of show is if you can indicate your mic preferences. So the microphone that your speakers want to use. Often in your AV proposal, it's going to include a variety of microphones. If it doesn't, it should. You want to make sure it includes a variety. But anywhere that you can have those conversations with speakers before they arrive on site will just help make the speaker feel more prepared, because you've talked about what they wanted for a mic. You've agreed on it. They show up. Oh, and look, they have the mic they talked about. But you also want to include that information on your run of show, because then your production team is in the know and able to say, oh, you said that Jessica really wanted a lavalier mic, the one that clips onto their shirt. Great. I wrote that on the run of show. So now the tech, when they come to their tech check, our AV tech already has a lavalier ready to put on them. Again, this is a detail you could figure out on site, but just I found the more information you can tell the speakers ahead of time, and then use your run of show as your transfer of knowledge to your production team so that they're aware and everybody's on the same page when they show up. My fifth go-to tip for your run of show is to highlight any embedded videos or audio in a presentation. I was talking with a client the other day and they were like, Logan, we don't know if this person's going to pull up speaker A or speaker B to join them on stage for Q&A. And they are like, I think that's going to scare you a bit. And I said, well, that's very kind of you. That part doesn't scare me a bit. Having any kind of hidden video or audio that's embedded in your presentation and you don't tell me, that's what scares me as the producer or show caller. So if you are the one who's helping build the PowerPoint presentation or the content, make sure you highlight. I love to pick a color, one color that just means any of my videos. You'll notice it in the template. I use a color to call out any videos. And that is just something, it pops off the page. It lets me know and my production team know, oh, something different's coming, and different other than just speaker and static slides. And so make sure you don't have in your run a show where it just says like Jessica's presentation. Poor Jessica, I'm saying her name a lot this episode, but Jessica's presentation, 20 minutes. Well, in there, make another line and say maybe slide 7, embedded video with audio, or embedded audio that advances on a click. Anywhere you can add those details for anything that's out of the ordinary. Not only are you setting up your production team for success, but you're setting yourself up for success if you're the one cueing it. And you just want to call out anything that's not super obvious. My 6th tip is to put file names in the graphics or video columns of your run a show. This makes it so much easier for your tech to find. Again, you might give all the graphics to somebody in a folder on a USB drive or something. And if in it, it says all these fun video titles, or it says, my favorite for events is when we have lots of speakers and let's say the event is called like ABC's conference. My favorite is getting a lot of presentations that are called ABC's conference because the speaker makes them. And to them, they're the only speaker going to the ABC conference. So that's why they type that. But you as the producer or the tech receive these and they're all named the same thing. How are you going to know whose presentation is whose? Now, I often have to use context clues and like open the presentation and maybe they have the speaker's name on the title slide. But take the time, if you, again, are trying to make this as turnkey and seamless as possible, is to rename in the run a show the exact file name in that graphics column. What I'll often do is when client sends me files, I actually rename them myself. And we love a numbering system. So like 00, 01, 02, 03 for the exactly in chronological order of when things need to be played. But I will also go in and clean up, like I said, ABC's conference presentation. I would probably then say Jessica Smith's presentation, but I would say 04 maybe if she's the 4th thing that we have to play. So you're just, again, trying to make it super obvious and avoid that mistake of someone accidentally bringing up the wrong slides because it wasn't clear. So make sure you're putting those file names in. And that task, this like 6th tip, I often won't do this until like the week of the show or a couple days before the show because I know things change. So I'll keep placeholder text in for however my client talks about like things, like someone had like meeting the moment and that was the name of a video. Then they sent it to me and it was a completely different file name. So I then renamed it 01 meeting the moment video version 1 V1. And that helped my tech see, okay, it matches what's in the run a show. You just want to make sure we're all saying the same things. Number 7 would be have a go-to Spotify playlist for your events and download any music files that you might need for walk-on. I feel like a broken record when I talk about how magical music is. You know, we talk about events, how important just engaging the different senses are. And I think so many people think about visuals, think about what's on the screen and what's the decor, but music, a lot of this I learned from my sports world. Music makes such a difference. And that's why, like a sporting event, if you're playing loud, like EDM, electric music over and over, you're going to exhaust people. But also if you're playing like smooth jazz, you're going to notice that your audience energy level is a lot lower. And that's why having a DJ at my live sporting events is so cool because then we can react to the crowd and we can play with them and do more and react to exactly who's in the room. Now, often with my corporate and nonprofit events, they don't have the budget to bring in a DJ. And so what I found is I often just have a go-to Spotify playlist that is upbeat, it's clean, and it is popular music. So those are the 3 check boxes I usually do. And again, a lot of clients don't think about music, so I use this playlist a lot. And then I have a downloaded list of music from the YouTube royalty-free music library, which I'll link here in the show notes. And those are files that I know if I am streaming an event anywhere, I can play the songs, and YouTube isn't going to have an issue. And so that's something that's really easy. They're just like bops. You're not going to know the words, but it just adds a little energy and fills the silence that can come in during my point number 1, talking all about transition. So just making sure you have some go-to music, especially if you're someone who does multiple events. That is a place where you can customize it per event, but I just find a lot of people get so like busy with all the other elements, they forget about music. So I've learned just to have a go-to in my back pocket. Number 8, on your run of show, you want to include any stage or prop movements. So this is something that, like, again, you want a cheat sheet, something easy that people know what to do. And so I usually like to highlight this in gray on my run of show. So you can see I have white is most of my slide. White is most of the cells. Blue is my lovely color I like for videos. And then I do gray. And this is often something that is to indicate, oh, this isn't happening on stage, but this is something that does need to happen at a very specific time. And I don't want us to forget it by putting it in like a far off column or another sheet of paper. So for like example, I had a client who wanted to do these pop-ups at their event. It was super cool, something different where they had pre-planned people in the audience who were going to pop up and answer a question. And we had it in 3 different table locations. And so I put in my run of show as an actual line item, move Mike from table A to table B. And that was to make sure that whoever I had assigned when we were on site knew and saw it as a line item of like, oh yeah, at some point between this element and that element, I need to move that microphone. So again, that's a great place if you have to move any kind of furniture. I put that usually in gray, again, as a line item on the run of show versus putting in like the notes column, because I think that can get hidden. My 9th, second to last tip, we're almost there, is all about using formulas. I've talked about it here on the podcast before, but again, I still see people manually typing in numbers or times to their run of show. I love to have a formula that has a column for start time, column for end time, and a column for run time. And my formula is I always make the start time, the first cell, I'm deciding, what time my event starts, 7 p.m. But then after that, the end time is just start time plus run time equals my end time. And then next line down, the start time for the next element just equals the end time. And the reason this is just so magical is when you have a speaker as you're doing your event planning process who's like, oh, they're going to speak for 5 minutes. Now they want to speak for 10. If you have these formulas set up, you would just adjust where it said 5 minutes in runtime. You adjust that to 10 minutes and everything else magically updates. Chef's kiss. That's amazing. I also use that for my sequence. The first column in any run of show, you need to have that. I probably should have put that as a tip. Honestly, is the first column's a sequence numbered 1 through whatever, or if you have multiple days, we've done like 1 through whatever is day 1, 200 to anything is day 2, 300 anything is day 3. Why do you need that? Because that makes it really easy for your show caller or you to talk to your tech of like, what queue are you looking at? Oh, I'm looking at Q17. So we all go down to Q17. And this isn't the Excel like row number because that doesn't always print out. You want its own column. But again, that's something I always make a formula. So it's just the cell equals the cell above plus 1. And so that makes it pretty easy unless you're doing a lot of copying and pasting where you need to go back and like copy paste just to clean up the sequence. That is something that's, again, super easy when I'm moving things around versus me manually having to type the numbers 1, enter 2, enter 3, enter 4. And I have some shows that have like 150 cues, 200 cues. I have other shows that have 35 cues. Doesn't matter how many, having those formulas is just so helpful. And then my add-on to that is if you need to save printing space when you're printing your run of show to use on site, you can always hide that end time column. So you just need the start time, run time. And if that formula is working, you don't really need the end time, to be honest, because the end time is the start time of the next element. So it's already kind of captured that information somewhere. My last and 10th go-to tip for your run of show still has to do with timing is to go back and add in the actual timings post-event to help out future you. So you'll see on my template, I actually have a column there that says actual time, and you can either hide that column when you print, again, for your on-site stuff, or you can leave it and then have space for you to write down the actual run times. The number of conversations I have with clients when I work with them year after year is us trying to remember, wait, how long did that take last year? And I've been so happy anytime I've remembered to both in real time jot down the timings of different segments, but then actually transcribe my handwritten notes into the last year's run of show. And I'm not deleting or adding lines or anything. It's just that one column that shows me, ooh, we said that person was going to talk for only 15 minutes. They talked for 35. Oh my gosh. And that's real talk, listeners. Somebody did that. It helps you get better at estimating how long things take. So that's a question I get asked a lot as a producer, a show caller. They ask for my advice on how long should this transition take? Or award shows, how long should we have per award? A lot of it depends on the audience, the company culture, the person presenting, some of those things, but you will start to hone in. Like for one of my clients, we've learned 2.5 minutes. That's exactly how long we need per award. Just 2.5 minutes, because we say, here, this person is a blah, 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 and the winner is, they come to stage, they make very brief remarks thanking people, and we move on. I have another award show where they like to play these videos they've made where the winner is sharing their story and everything, and then they come up on stage and do a brief thank you speech. Inclusive of the video, that client needs 7 minutes per award. So you can see the timing really differs. But both of those shows, I will say this year, I indicated actual times, and they were pretty spot on for the 7 minutes for one client and the 2.5 minutes for the other client. So just help future you out. You're not going to remember off the top of your head how long things take a year later or even 6 months later. So just write it down in your run a show. Whew, that was 10 tips, folks. That was a lot of ones for your run a show. I feel like I could go on and on, but I felt like 10 was a good overview for you. Hopefully you had a nugget or two that you can apply to improving your next run a show, or talk to your producer or show caller about their run a show. I am somebody who always does this for almost every show that I'm on. And so this is also something that if it's overwhelming for you, it's a great opportunity to hire a producer or a show caller to do this for you. I'm also playing around with the idea of being a run a show writer for clients who maybe can't afford to have me on site or to run the show for them. But doing this where I can write it and ask some of these questions. So just something I'm noodling about. We'll see. Stay tuned if I actually do launch that. But yeah, that brings me to the end of this episode. And since you just have me today, we're going to go into our bonus tip. So this week's bonus tip is to make sure in your event budget, you factor in some money for printing, specifically your run a shows. And depending on the size of your event, if it's just one person or two people, you can probably print it at home or at your office with your regular printer. But if you are someone who is traveling in for an event, knowing how many changes get made with run a shows, I would just factor in some money to your budget to go and get things printed at a printing shop like FedEx. Sometimes your hotel can help you, but this is something when I had to print 20 run a shows, that can take a lot of time on a regular printer. And it just happens so much faster going to a FedEx with the file, boom, printed out 20 copies. Maybe it was 10 minutes tops. And it was an extra cost to my budget compared to me printing it at home, but I know I saved so much time. So if you are doing a larger production, make sure you talk about who's printing what and then factoring some of those costs in it. And I'm telling you, FedEx sometimes is really worth it if you're printing large quantities. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. As always, you can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. As I mentioned, email us to get that free run a show template that has been updated for 2025. You can also connect with Mary and I directly on LinkedIn. We love hearing from you. Just mention in the message when you put that connect offer in that you heard about us from the podcast. So that just helps us know that you're a listener. And we are inviting you to join our private community over on Substack, which includes an exclusive Slack community. Hey, Better Events Pod community. We love those of you who have already jumped in. And as always, we appreciate you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.